Yeah.
So you took, but you took in this sort of. Was that when you started discovering all these different things? And
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's a process of osmosis. It's just, you know, you do gradually pick things up as you go along, and you gradually pick things up by looking at people who are just streets ahead of you, streets ahead of everybody.
I think that that page from the Shimura page here, that's a bit more like that, isn't it? It's a bit more, even though you still. There's a lot of changes of angle and there's a much more sort of variety going on with it.
Yeah, all the blue panels in this were they were like CCTV footage, and it was basically it was a kind of motorbike jousting match on a set of stairs, and I thought, you know, doing that for like however many pages it lasted, 4 or 5 or 6 pages, was going to be very samey. So the blue panels and the inset panels, you know, these were the CCTV footage, and it was partly to kind of break it up a bit. But I mean, I'm doing lots of. I mean, I'm sure most of you know about the 180 rule. It's like in television where if you've got 2 people talking to each other, you don't have like 2 cameras set up in the middle, you know, looking at each of the people, because then you would just have a front-on shot that kept changing from one head to another. You know, you move the cameras back as though you were watching a tennis match or something. So when you see the headshots, that each of them tilted in towards the other, and it makes much more sense. It's the sort of thing like when you're watching a television programme or reading a comic. It's the kind of thing that you shouldn't actually be aware of as a reader, but you obviously have to be aware of when you're drawing it. I wasn't really aware at that time.
But we all take that in when we watch TV, don't we? Because they use those rules in TV and film.
Yeah, but the thing is, I never really noticed.
You have to be aware of it.
Yeah, which is why I would
take it and use it.
Yeah, I was constantly breaking the 180 rule when I started it, just because, you know. And the other thing is, it takes you so long to sit and do the page. So I mean, you know the story really well from reading the script before you start. You know, you've done all the thumbnails, you break it down into a page layout, and you really get lost in it, and you forget the fact that somebody flipping through it, you know, who doesn't, you know, like maybe isn't actually reading it that well, you know, they're just flicking through it, going, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Where you've been working on it for like 6 weeks, you know, and
sometimes you get too close, don't you?
That's exactly it.
You don't take that perspective. Because I used, when I started, I used to show my dad, and my dad don't give a shit about comics. Yeah. And I said, can you tell what's going on here? And he'd go, oh yeah, this fella's doing that. And I thought if he could understand it, I'd sort of done something right. It might not be the whole story, but if you sort of knew where people were in relation to each other and when the scene changed and stuff like that, I'd done my job, because visually it made sense.
Yeah.
And I thought that was, not that I do that anymore, but you know, but it's just, I think it's quite a good way of, I don't know, it was quite a good measure.
Unfortunately, I didn't know your dad, so.
Yeah, he's probably pissed you off. Yeah. So what's going on now?
Yeah, well,
no, wait, we'll move on to something else. Oh, shall we get that Lobo stuff up?
Sure, yeah. Lobo was a turning point for me.
Here we go.
Yeah, well, you start page 1. Alan Grant wrote this script for me. I won't go into details of this, some funny stories attached to it, but it's completely irrelevant to the storytelling aspect. And this was the first, I think at this point I might have done a couple of the big books, which were these paradox books, and they were like a rigid 9-panel grid, and they were often like documentary style comics. But
didn't really have much continuity, did they?
No, they had very little continuity. But this Lobo story, this was kind of my first. This was really my first kind of DC job, and I was going to go all out to make this the best thing I've done, which I do with every new project I start, every new page I start is going to be the best thing I've done. It's always, it never is, and it's always a disappointment. But just flick on with this, the first couple of pages, thanks. Okay, but again, what I was doing, there's an establishing shot of sorts, you know, but you know, you go into the second panel and then the third panel and then the fourth panel. There's not an awful lot of thought as, you know, like where the imaginary camera is going. More of the thought was to who's speaking first, right? I'll need to swing the camera around so they're over at the left. There still wasn't a great deal of like fluidity, you know, in the kind of the visual narrative. There wasn't really a lot of that kind of thing going on. I was just trying to make the drawings good and trying to make it fit together as a page in terms of you can see what's going on and all the speak bubbles are going to go in the right places, so it will read that way. If you flick on to the next page, thanks. Right, this was a 3-page sequence where Lobo's already down on the ground and he looks up, and the opening scene, the opening frame is we're looking up at this big gang, the Captain Caveman Club, and then the next 3 panels he starts knocking him about, you know. And I'd worked this. It's a 3-page scene. It just slowly flick through it. Thanks. Oh no, that's yeah, that one. And then here's the, you know, it's just, although I'm still breaking the 180 rule and stuff, it's one of these things where it was a fixed camera. It was like the camera was in a tripod and you were watching something choreographed, and I really thought it out. And it's, you know, like if he's doing a right hook, he's leading with the left leg, and then he's stepping in with the right leg as he goes for a left uppercut. No, I mean, it was really choreographed. But I sent it in. The whole thing was done in blue line, which is why I scanned them in and tried to kind of darken them up a bit, so they're kind of crappy looking. But I sent this in. Dan Raspler was the editor, and I was sure he was going to get back to me and say this is great, and it took him like 10 days or something to get back to me. And when he eventually got back to me, he said, "Dude, I've been wanting to phone you, I just didn't know how to go about it." That doesn't sound good. And he said, "You know, that I can see what you've done, you know, and I can see how much thought you've put into this, but," he said, "it's just, I can't believe the fact that it's all from a fixed angle, and it's just boring. You've put so much work into this, and it's just boring to look at." And he said, "If you never actually thought of like going for a close-up, you know, you've already seen the right hook, so maybe with the left uppercut, you don't need to see the 2 full figures again. Why not just go in and see the hand connecting with the jaw? You know, you can do that, and you pull out, move the camera about a bit. You know, you don't need to see how it fits together. It's just a fight." So if you, I redrew these. I redrew quite a lot of the pages in it. So
that's the second version.
So there's instead of if you flick between them, you know, so then it becomes a full image style. It becomes a full panel shot with 3 panels overlaid. I mean, the panels are still not being tilted around or anything. It is still quite stayed, but it's basically the same thing done from different angles and kind of zooming in and out. It was really my first stab at it, and you know, I'm not comfortable with us taking this long over it because it still doesn't really work that well. But this.
But it's a good illustration of the difference.
Yeah, just a different approach to it. Yeah, because really before then I was still kind of working. Although I'd seen Mobius stuff and Otomo stuff and a whole lot of other Frank Miller and Dave Gibbons and a whole lot of other good stuff. I mean, the fact that I'd managed to look at so much of Dave Gibbons' work and not actually realise that was pretty much perfect, like simple economic storytelling, you know, and I'd never really picked up that much of what he was doing, you know. So this was a real big stepping stone for me. Fortunately, it never got published for other reasons which aren't really relevant to the whole storytelling issue. It was more a censorship thing. The story was a bit crude, but it never got published. But after this was back, I think, kind of early to mid 90s, and this was the start of my slowly growing obsession with storytelling.